My name is Deferent, and I work for the European Commission Representation Office in Copenhagen. I'm here with 4 exciting panelists who I will introduce now. Arantxa Mendijarrat from Deliberative in Spain, Graham Smith from University of Westminster, Jane Sweeter from Dublin City University, and Bjørn Bedsted from the Danish Board of Technology. Bjørn will moderate the actual discussion that we will continue afterwards. I'm here in my capacity of working on one of the Commission's member state representation offices. I'm new to this job, and I'm also new to working with citizen engagement. As you know, and has also been presented this morning at the festival, it's the aim that the institutions, which include the representation, should increasingly work with citizens and civic organizations as partners. The representations could hopefully in the future have a more important role on facilitating citizen engagement in the EU policymaking because of the proximity of the representations, because of them being able to work taking into account the political and social situation, the civic engagement cultures, of course. The representations are important actors that secure the necessary partnerships with the local actors. And as you know, one size does not fit all. What works in Denmark may not work in Italy. The Conference for the Future of Europe opens up more possibilities for the representations to be involved. And it's for us to take up this challenge and with the help of the local partners start these good deliberative practices. So we will be building up capacity in the representations. I'm now very pleased to pass the word to Bjørn, our moderator.
Yeah, thank you, Pernille. So this conversation will be about institutionalization of citizen engagement. The conversation will be structured around 3 discussion points, which will be introduced one at a time and discussed one at a time. I have posted those discussion points in the chat. So they're always there, so you can find them and figure out what we're talking about. Feel free to use the chat throughout the session, but please don't expect us to answer all the time. After half an hour or so, we'll send you into breakout groups of around 4 people. And here you can come up with questions for the panel, and we'll spend whatever time is left to discuss a couple of those questions. If you have the time, you'll be able to post them in an online forum after this conversation, and we can continue the conversation there. About institutionalization. So this conservatorio takes as its starting point a point in the near future where everyone fully understands, agrees, and complies with the key principles of citizen engagement, such as the fact that citizen engagement should only be initiated if results are taken seriously. Also, when we talk about citizen engagement, we mostly talk about the structured engagement of mini-publics, although we appreciate the fact that other kinds of citizen engagement exist and have democratic value. In short, this conservatory takes as its starting point a near future in which the quality of citizen engagement is not something that needs constant reminding, but more energy can be put into a discussion about the role it should have in a deliberative system and democracy. So that brings me to the first discussion point, which is, I would call a statement. And the statement kind of answers the open question, which is the title of this conservatorio. So the statement goes, that citizen engagement is both an end and a means for a more deliberative culture and democracy. So what does that mean for what we're trying to achieve as a community? It means that we should aim both for the permanent institutionalized citizen engagement mechanisms or models, such as permanent citizens' assemblies with a clear political mandate, and for a proliferation of citizen engagement activities. There's a danger in both approaches. If we only have the institutional CE models, they risk stiffening into power structures and providing excuses for not organizing ad hoc citizen engagement activities and the deliberative culture that goes with that. If we don't have them, we risk a proliferation of citizen engagement activities without any political mandate, political power, or impact. So now I would like to pass on the word to the panelists and maybe start with Arantxa, your views on this discussion point. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Very nice to be here with you. I'm talking from Bilbao. So on this first point, thank you, Bjørn, for this introduction. It's really nice to start with very clear statements, a conversation. So about this sentence, if deliberative processes are both an end and a mean, I would like to insist that for me it's overall a mean. It's a mean to lead to better policy outcomes. Also, it allows to give decision makers greater legitimacy, and it enhances public trust in democratic institutions. So I think, yes, I would really insist in this means side, let's say, of the deliberative processes. And also, you're talking about the danger of both approaches. I would like to insist also in the benefits of institutionalizing. Yeah, I think it helps maybe conducting deliberative processes more easily and less expensively, because it's something that repeats over the time. It's easier to reuse processes, documents, capabilities, and also you can put things quicker. And it also normalizes the use of deliberative processes and create a culture of deliberation. And I don't see so much danger because of rotation, because we know that participants rotate all the time. So yeah, that would be my first thoughts on this first point.
All right, thanks. Jane?
Yeah, thanks. Hello, everybody. Lovely to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Bjørn. I really like the framing that it's both a means and an end. I think it's important because I suppose where we're really trying to get to is to have the most deliberative system that we can. So that means that the maximum amount of deliberation in all sorts of arenas of policy making and decision making, all the way from schools and universities through to cities and regions and for national level. But the problem, I agree, is that you know, there's so much interest in this now, and people come to me and everybody else here quite often with ideas for deliberation, but quite often they've got no idea about where it's actually, what decision-making level it's actually going to be at, and what the attachment is to that decision-making level. So I think while it's good to think about increasing deliberation across the system, we really need to focus on that part of, well, where is the decision going to be made and can it have any impact? I think it's interesting where it is in different countries, you know, because in Ireland we're quite unusual in that a lot of the deliberation has been at a national level in terms of reforming a constitution, and relatively little at local levels. That's beginning to change a little bit. Whereas in England, for example, Graham Condoy, but he'll have been involved with so many more, you know, local and regional kind of deliberative events. So I think it's trying to get the connection between all of these. I don't think any country in Europe has quite got there. So the the renewed focus of the Commission, I think, and of the representations, and I think of Horizon Europe and maybe the last cause of Horizon 2020, in terms of trying to bring deliberation into all sorts of levels at different policy levels, is really welcome. And it's something that will increase the deliberative capacity, I suppose, of the system as a whole, at a European, national and local level. And I suppose that's really where we want to get to.
Thanks, Jane, and I'll pass it on to Graham.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for setting up such interesting questions, Bjørn. I just want to. I know you started this off by saying, well, let's assume a place in which these things are institutionalized and happening. But I think it's really important that we do need to distinguish a couple of aspects of institutionalization. These things may be up and running and formalized. I think the important thing that we really need to see is cultural institutionalization, where actually, I mean, these things could be up and running and having little effect. And we really need to see sort of cultural institutionalization, which to me means changes in practices of public administrations and others, such that these things are having a material effect on the way that we do things. So I can imagine a world, I think Bjørn, you were trying to imagine a world with both of those things, but I can imagine a world with one of those things and not the other. And it worries me sometimes that when we think about us people interested in citizen engagement, spend too much time thinking about the citizen engagement bit and not enough about the cultural impact into public administration. So I just wanted to kind of raise that as a really critical issue. The second thing is I really appreciate the fact that you're saying that deliberative democracy is more than citizens' assemblies. I get very worried about people who kind of equate deliberative democracy to being just running a few assemblies. So I like that. And it's this, and I guess picking up from the two other speakers, from Rankia and from Jane, this idea that these citizens' assemblies are really important moments, but they need to be part of a broader system of deliberative exchange. And so we need to be thinking about things like, what does it mean to promote deliberative democracy in everyday talk? What does it mean to do it in our everyday patterns of living, in our workplaces, as Jane was pointing out, in our social, in our sort of everyday exchanges, and such that they can actually ripple through as well. And I think it's this question about how porous public administrations are to these kinds of ongoing conversations, and citizens' assemblies are really a critical part of the infrastructure here. But I really appreciate that it's much more than that. It's much more thinking about what it means to promote deliberative democracy in other spheres of our lives.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I think my purpose with this statement was to get that conversation going, to not get too caught up in aiming for single institutional structures where citizen engagement is repeated and thinking about that as the only end goal, because I think the end goal is bigger than that, and a combination of different things. Yes, Graham?
So I think one of the dangers here is there could be a sort of tick box mentality. We've run a citizens' assembly, we've done deliberative democracy, now we can move on to the next item. Do you see what I mean? There is that worry, and I think deliberative democracy is about a way of doing things, not just a one-off institution.
Yes, it is hopefully some kind of cultural maturation of the society. Yeah. I'll jump quickly to the next discussion point, which is more of a postulate. So here it goes. The postulate is that the purpose of citizen engagement is not only to empower citizens, it is perhaps more importantly also to provide a center of gravity for different types of knowledge and opinions provided by experts, stakeholders, and policymakers. So what does that mean for what we're trying to achieve? It means that citizen engagement is not about bringing power to the people, but about fostering a deliberative and transparent policymaking process. Some measure of power must be delegated to citizens to balance the power and bias of lobbyists, stakeholders, and so on, but it is not the end goal. The end goal is a deliberative democracy in which decision-making is informed by facts and opinions provided by different societal actors. When at its best, citizen engagement can help establish the middle ground where different positions are openly debated and negotiated. And it follows from this that the main role of citizen engagement organizers or facilitators is not to advocate some hidden or intrinsic will of the people, but rather to search for, investigate, and bring forward different societal positions. Thus, it is not the purpose of a citizen engagement activity to search inside lay citizens for some hidden knowledge or opinion, but rather to search for and uncover a multitude of knowledges or knowledge and opinions, and function as what you could call an honest broker between those different positions, and to enable citizens themselves to function as honest brokers and arbiters between different societal interests, wishes, and concerns. So with that postulate, I'll ask Jane to go first.
Thanks, Bjørn. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. There's obviously lots of different ways of looking at it, but like if I think first about how it might work within a kind of a more formal deliberative structure where you're considering evidence from people, which I think is where this is probably cited as opposed to kind of deliberative principles more broadly. I think one of the key kind of means is the lobbying. So in most of our democracies, we're quite used to special interests and lobbyists having privileged access to policy-making elites. And deliberative democracy is one way for the citizens' interests to get to those policymakers. So I think it's important to see that. But the other thing is that if we do that, then it's likely that those organizers are going to be lobbied themselves in terms of who is actually going to be allowed to present evidence to the citizens. And I think we need to think about that really, really carefully, because the more these are institutionalized, the more danger there is that they become part of the overall structure, and people see the right for themselves to get there. So we need to really ensure that those who are giving evidence, that it's a fully open and transparent process, that citizens are engaged as much as possible in terms of who they would like to hear evidence or testimony from. They should be able to suggest the names. And I think here as well, it's really important that, we have some sort of agreement about who are experts and who are interest groups. Certainly in the Irish, in the kind of the narrow citizen assembly thing in Ireland, it'll be quite clear that an economist from a trade union or a business group would be an interest group representative rather than an expert, even though they would have expertise in economics. And the final part, I think, is that we really need to think about the participation of ordinary people. So I know you say it's not about uncovering some hidden will of the people, but I think it is about actually listening to people's experiences, listening to their lived experiences, and understanding that. On the one hand, this helps some people with less formal education to engage, but it's also really important that others get to see and hear what the lived impact of the policymaking is. And I think it's important that you actually listen to the people who are affected rather than what can sometimes be the tendency to listen to their representatives or to civil society groups who are set up to advocate on their behalf. So yeah, that would be my overall take there. Thanks, Bjørn.
Thanks, Jane. I'll pass it on to Graham.
Okay. Are they about empowering citizens or not? You're being controversial here, Bjørn. I mean, it's a really we know that within the deliberative democracy movement, there are different perspectives on whether or not this is, you know, people are more, have got a more participatory impulse and saying actually these institutions should be empowered, and actually if they're not empowered, then you know you're creating this public judgment, and then it's going to institutions who you know who knows what they're going to do with that, cherry pick it, selective listening, etc. So I mean, you've touched on a really on a nerve at the moment here, and of course you have. I mean, that's the function of these statements. But I think it would be I think most people who are involved with citizens' assemblies see them as empowerment as a really critical element. But I think what's critical here is to think about why they've emerged, and I think the main driver here is a recognition of a certain dysfunctionalities of democracy as currently practiced. And what I'm thinking of here is, for example, the effect of the sort of electoral party motives, with people constantly thinking about what's the next election, short term, what we might think of short-term thinking, and the sort of impact of vested interests. And so there's this desire to try and create a different sort of space, and citizens' assemblies are one response to that. And I'm not saying citizens' assemblies are the right response to that, or the only response to that, but it is a recognition that there are sort of dysfunctionalities in the system. And I think citizens' assemblies do give us something that other institutions appear to be incapable of doing, which is this idea of public judgment based on a sort of diversity of perspectives, considering issues at hand and actually bringing forward a public judgment rather than the judgment of a particular sector, a special interest or whatever. So I think one of the attractions, what's attracted so many of us to citizens' assemblies is this way that it generates a different type of judgment. And now the question is, what happens to that? And is it something that should be given a particular status within the political process, or is it just yet another input into the policy process? So for me, I'm more on the sort of empowerment end of this, but I know that view can be it can be seen as quite controversial.
Well, it's good to be controversial. Arantxa?
Yes, I really like this last thing you said, Graham, about the dysfunctionality of democracy. Of course, it's the starting point of all these new processes. And I guess also I'm talking more from a country where almost no processes are happening right now. So you're already, you're in another stage where you have had all these experiences in Ireland, in Great Britain, in Denmark. And so you can talk about the danger, and but we are before. And I would like to go back to this concept of this idea of center of gravity. You said, Bjørn, that I think is really nice, and this place where experts, stakeholders, policymakers, and citizens can gather, and this is something that is so needed, and not only with all those people. First, between citizens, there is such a polarization in society, especially in Spain, and of course in a lot of countries. We need these spaces where citizens with different opinions, different judgments, different backgrounds, just meet and talk and then deliberate, of course. So it's as important as gathering all these people and being the center of gravity for all these people to exchange and to deliberate.
Thanks, Arantxa, and just let me follow up. I think what I'm also trying to say here, and what I also hear from you guys, is that yes, citizen engagement is important, and we all agree, as an introduction of another kind of voice and societal actor to balance, other positions in society. But the other part of it, which I think is sometimes forgotten, is that they also act as mediators for those different positions, and can actually serve as that, gathering point where it doesn't become so important any longer that their voice is heard, but rather that they function as some kind of middle ground where other voices can be heard. So in a way, I think they have an even larger role in a democratic or deliberative democracy than we sometimes think, and just a reminder not to stop at the point where we're saying, oh, that's great, citizens' voices have been heard. Now we have a more function. I mean, we can even do more than that with citizen engagement. Okay, quickly move on to the next one. I think we might actually be in time. So the last one is more of a proposition, the last discussion point. And the proposition goes that our goal should be a European infrastructure of honest brokers that can implement future citizen engagement activities. So Europe already has a number of organizations such as university institutes, non-profit organizations, consultancies, technology assessment institutes, and public offices with an expertise in citizen engagement. Networks of practice have developed around participatory technology assessment, responsible research and innovation, and deliberative democracy. And it is important that these organizations receive encouragement and support to remain centers of excellence for practicing different types of citizen engagement and developing new ones. So with that proposition, I think, Graham, you go first this time.
Yeah, well, if this is an argument that my research centre should be have more investment from the European Union, I'm delighted. Absolutely, thank you. So I'll just leave it there. And so the clearly one of the things we don't invest enough is our civic infrastructure. We kind of assume democracy will get on with itself and somehow remain robust, remain resilient. And I think that's a real concern. And so actually strengthening those organizations that are able to deliver, to evaluate, to challenge is a really critical element. I know the European Union does spend money on sort of aspects of democracy work, but it's a minor part of the budget. And I kind of think that we've only got to look across to see what's happening in the US at the moment to recognize that the democratic institutions are fragile institutions. They need investment, and that's something we need to think critically about. The issue about honest brokers, I think, is a real challenge here, and it'd be interesting to know what your thoughts about this are, Bjørn, because I think some of the institutions that are in this space are actually in a really difficult position because many of them rely very heavily on commissions from public agencies in order to do their work. And they very well know sometimes that those commissions are just not adequate and that those agencies aren't ready to work with that. So there is this danger that sort of requirement of having to chase contracts for that trace commissions can actually leave the critical element, which says we've got to do this better. And in a funny kind of way, actually, these kind of spaces are really important because they are these sorts of spaces we're in at the moment are the spaces where we can say, yeah, it's great that you're starting to work with deliberative processes, but actually it isn't just about running the occasional citizens assembly, it's about doing things differently. And I think that's quite difficult because at the moment we tend to almost have a sort of mini industry of people who deliver these things and not enough of a critical conversation across Europe about what this means for our democracy. That would be my take on it.
All right, you asked me, but I'll wait until we heard from the others. So I'll pass on the word to Arantxa.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I agree with Graham. And when I read honest brokers, I think about standards. So where can we do we already have common standards at European level? Can we agree on common standards? I'll leave it there.
Jane?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say as well, is that obviously greater investment in the infrastructure that can support democratic innovations and democracies would be welcome. I think it's great that you know, the final round of H2020 will have some more and things. But the problem with all that project funding is that it just goes project to project, and it's really difficult for people to actually build up capability and the running of offices and so on with that kind of project funding. So I think, you know, some type of funding that can actually enable more people to be able to survive between projects would be excellent. But I think the really big thing is evaluation, and, you know, what are the evaluative standards? You know, like we run evaluations on some processes, asking similar kind of questions, for example, that they are in Scotland at the moment. But, you know, there's different questions in different countries. Do they matter? We don't ever compare them really, you know, so I think, as Arantxa said, it would be great to, you know, to come to some sort of agreement about what are the important things to evaluate, and to have it as a standard that all these processes are evaluated, that, you know, if public money is going to be spent on them, that there, you know, there is some evaluation of the deliberative quality of them.
Thanks.
Maybe, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Arantxa.
Maybe we can just add that that this report from OECD in June 2020 was the first step, also establishing some kind of standards with these principles that they have come up with after studying many experiences in the world in the last 30 years.
So I think this discussion points in several different directions. I mean, the point about a critical conversation, I think many of the operators, you know, in this area are quite idealistic. So I think the most important critical discussion is going on between, you know, the actual practical organizer and the contracting public institution. At the early stages, there's a lot of negotiation going on, and my experience is that these organizations are always trying to push for getting their foot as far as they can into the political machine room and have political buy-in before they start a process. And also I have experience with many who just simply let go and say, no, we don't want to touch it. When I talk about organizations, it's also a question of arm's length. I mean, who should be doing this in the future? I mean, public institutions can build up a capacity, but they cannot be centers of excellence, I don't think. I mean, you need those different kind of organization as centers of excellence as powerhouses that can keep the know-how developing and develop new things. I personally, with the Danish Board of Technology, had the experience of being mainstreamed in 2011, before which we were a public institution, but we managed to survive as a non-profit foundation. But one of the rationales that came after the decision, which has nothing to do with it anyways, but after the fact, one of the rationales was that this kind of expertise would have to be mainstreamed to public institutions, and this didn't really happen. So this is just a warning to an encouragement to public institutions in Europe to say, take care of this know-how. If this is going to work in the future, we need this diversity of centers of excellence. Yeah, Graham.
So just to say that exactly the same thing, well, not exactly, similar kind of thing is happening to ScienceWise in the UK, where that's being moved out of government into research, into UKRI, to the research institutes. So, you know, I agree. It's really hard, whether or not you can create sort of quasi-autonomous public bodies that are able to kind of oversee this, as I think we've seen one similar like to that in Tuscany. But, you know, it's an interesting question. It's a really, I think you're touching on, you know, where's the if things are being outsourced, where's the commitment by public agencies?
Yeah. All right, we're just a little behind the schedule, not a lot. So the idea now is to send participants out in breakout groups and to discuss a question for the panel. Maybe we should say 9 minutes, Matthias, if you didn't already prepare the breakout groups. And then when you're back in plenary, you can use the raise hand function if you have a question. You can also write your question in the chat, but only when you get back to plenary, otherwise we can't see them. We probably won't be able to answer all of them, but we'll collect them after the event and I think do something with them. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed having a little time to talk between yourselves. I think what we'll do now is to take 3 questions and then ask the panel to respond afterwards. If you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll just randomly select someone to ask a question. I think I should be able to see if someone raises a hand. It's in the participant function, right? No, it's in the chat function.
It's in the participant function.
Yeah. Yes, Angela, please go ahead.
Hi everyone, good to see you. In our group, we had the challenge to come up with a question in a few minutes, but we came up with the question, what are actually criteria for good deliberation? Like, how can you assess that a deliberation is a good deliberation? We have no other idea how to really put it in better terms, but maybe you can answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. And someone else with a question? Yes, Katie and then Paul, and then we have 3 questions. Katie, go ahead, please.
Actually, I put it in the chat, which was, can you envisage a time when citizen engagement is compulsory, like jury service, in a similar way that there is a time when citizens are encouraged, educated, encouraged to take part in decision making that affects their lives instead of handing it always over to politicians.
All right, thanks. And Paul?
Yeah, we covered 2 areas. One was about institutionalizing processes of culture. The other one, which I'll pick that one, is about empowerment. What does empowerment mean? It can be anything from trying to, give a voice to stateless refugees, which is a project I'm working on at the moment, as it happens, through to trying to make sure that your processes are empowering and not disempowering. So I think we just wanted to be clear when people are using the term empowerment, what they mean, and is what you're doing empowering or disempowering.
Thanks a lot. So those are the 3 questions. Who from the panel would like to try and respond first?
I'll go very quickly. So I'll give a quick answer to all 3, and then we'll see how others pick up. I think Angela's question about how do you measure good deliberation, I think, is a really important question. But also, there's a kind of rarefication of what good deliberation is within social science, which can get a little bit dangerous. For me, actually, it's about creating a space for a diversity of perspectives in a mutually to be articulated and listened to and understood in a mutually respectful context. And I think that's that, you know, I want to start with quite a minimal account and then make, you know, put other pressures on it. But for me, it's that sort of space for that diversity of perspectives to be heard and to be listened to. And so that would require quite minimal requirements, but then we might want other requirements on top of that. But I would start there. In terms of compulsory, I think, you know, that's a difficult one. Certainly, you know, Australia has compulsory voting, so it's a kind of, you can imagine that sort of situation. But remember, even back in ancient Greece, it wasn't compulsory that people took part in the everyday lives of the polis. And finally, with Paul, I think, you know, it's a good question. What do you mean by empowerment? It's a term that's thrown around a lot. And for me, you know, it can slip between the kind of giving voice, make sure that there's space for voice. But as someone who's kind of really interested in participatory democracy, it's also empowering, as in giving people decision-making power. And I think one of the problems within citizen engagement is we slip between those two and other forms. So I completely take your point, Paul. I think I use it in both of those terms irregularly and not with self-control.
Thanks, Graham. Arantxa or Jane, who would like to go? Arantxa, please go ahead.
Really hard questions. So these criteria for good deliberation, of course, I agree with what Graham said. I would go back again to these principles drafted by OECD, because they are there, and I think we should use them. You know, they are written. So it's not only about this moment of deliberation; it's the whole chain. Let's say from defining the purpose, having a clear political mandate, to group deliberation, and to coming up with a decision, and then seeing what happens with this decision. No? So I think there is a question in the chat about how do you ensure diversity. It's about also, of course, the representativeness of the group, or the descriptiveness of the group, thanks to civic lottery. It's about inclusiveness. It's about giving the right information. It's about transparency, very important, the link between the mini public and the maxi public, the society in general. So I think all those criteria should be taken into account for good deliberation. And then about citizen engagement being compulsory, I don't know. I think it's a hard question. I would tend to say that would be great, like an ideal in the future, but right now, of course, I don't see it possible.
Jane?
Yeah, so I'd agree in terms of evaluation. I'd agree with both Graham and around you want to start with a minimal definition, and you need to think about the whole system. Then if you go into a little bit more depth, I can, there's different kind of indices, and I think the OECD reports refer to them. You know, there's a deliberative quality index, and there's a perceived deliberative quality index, and so on. You know, those are well kind of settled in the literature, and there's different ways of evaluating it. But the main thing is that you hear those diversity of perspectives, but also that there's some sort of equality of voice. So, you know, we would always look and, you know, make sure there wasn't a single voice dominating at a round table, that everybody at that table felt they had the opportunity to be heard, that they felt respected and listened to. They didn't feel that they were shouted down or belittled, or, you know, these kind of things. And that they feel that they were actually given the diversity of views that they wanted. You know, that there weren't views that they'd asked for, that, you know, that weren't allowed into the room, and so on. So there's a number of different questions, and, you know, there's quite well established kind of surveys that do it, and so on. And I think there's actually somewhere else in this event over these few days that is specifically discussing evaluation. So I think if you're interested in that, it's probably, you know, good to maybe have a look at that discussion. I think it would be interesting. The second thing, in terms of the compulsory, I really just tend not to like the idea of compulsory. You know, I don't like the idea of compulsory voting. You know, I know it happens somewhere. You know, our first year politics students are always, you know, their first answer is always, oh, let's have compulsory voting and that'll increase turnout. But the evidence is very mixed in terms of, you know, the kind of efficacy that that produces and things. I'm not sure that it's always the right idea. And yeah, I probably we all need to think more carefully about exactly how we use empowerment.
And you wouldn't say, Jane, that compulsory is part of institutionalization?
No, I don't think so. Like, you know, an opportunity for everybody, you know, so people might expect that at some point in their lives, you know, after whatever age it's going to be, 15 or 16, that they will be given an invitation to participate in something like this. That this is considered a democratically valuable kind of service to society, that it's part of deliberative systems that you bring up and are part of the educational system from primary school on and so on. I think that's important. But, you know, I'm just not sure the value. You know, jury service is meant to be compulsory, but like how many people avoid it, you know? The research on juries is that they're not particularly heterogeneous, you know, they're not particularly diverse in all instances. So I'd certainly prefer to go down the, you know, strongly encouraged, but voluntary route, I think.
All right, thanks. We have 1 or 2 minutes left. So Mateus, I think we have a poll. Maybe you can publish that in the chat if that makes sense, and people can go in there while we finish off. Quickly, my 2 cents about criteria for good deliberation is that I'm aware it's a question I have consciously ignored for this session. Also to try to steer the discussion into a direction of discussing what kind of role citizen engagement should play in a deliberative democracy. And this is the debate I would like to make a few drum beats for. So while you finish or fill out the poll, please do so. Everyone is in the chat. I'll pass on the word to Pernille. And thank you everyone for a good discussion.
Thank you, Bjørn.
There's the poll.
Pernille?
Yes, we've come to the closing. The last thing will be the poll. Thank you very much for the good discussion. I invite everyone, and thank you very much for the panelists for taking their time. And I invite all of the panelists as well as the participants to stay with us throughout the week and keep tweeting if you're into that about the Citizen Engagement Festival. Okay, I will go into Slido.
All right. Thanks everyone and goodbye.